Okay, so what we're going to do here today is we're going to install this 7-degree rake block into this chassis. What we're going to have to do to accomplish that is we're going to have to cut this neck off, and then this is going to get installed in the backbone and in the neck to change the angle so we can put a bigger wheel on the front end. The first thing that we did to accomplish this is we had to disassemble all the sheet metal, take the front end off of it. Obviously, we had to remove all the electrics and pull them back here out of the way so that I had good access to the neck without having things in the way that I could damage. And the next thing that we do, once it's up here, we get it on a jack, and then we'll use a level to level the frame down here. Make sure it's perfectly level. I also utilize an inclinometer. I have a digital angle finder here that I like to utilize. Use the bottom frame rail, right at 0, right where we want it to be. Also double check on the neck. Should be right around 26 degrees, normally plus or minus a tenth. So that's where we're at. So I'm going to start by marking out where I want the cut on here so that I can separate it into 2 pieces. I'm going to start off by going 1 inch back from this fork lock plate that's welded to the neck. So I'm going to start here, mark 1 inch back on the top of the backbone. Use a square. Give me a nice square line. When we cut this neck, we don't want to cut square to the top of the backbone, because then we'll end up cutting down here into the down tubes, and we don't want that. We want these down tubes to stay together. So I'm going to bring it all the way to this point right here where the neck is welded to the backbone. I'm just going to use a straight edge like this. And cutting at that angle allows me to re-weld it here, and then when it's put back together, you'll understand a little more why I chose this specific spot rather than down here. I'm going to mark it on the other side. That way I have a mark on each side, and I can follow the line from each side to make sure that the cut is square and right along with the line where I want it to be. I'm going to lower the lift down so I can get access to the top of the frame easier instead of being way up in the air. I'm going to start off cutting it off by using a cutoff wheel on the grinder here. That helps me get in through this top part and in the sheet metal. I like to use reciprocating saw like a Sawzall, and that helps me make a nice cut, but it's hard to start that cut without the blade wanting to bounce around a bunch. So I like to use a cutoff wheel to make sure that I have a nice groove to start off in. Up the side with the cutoff wheel, and I'm going to use the reciprocating saw specifically to cut the bottom. This is too thick for a cutoff wheel. I'm just using a standard Sawzall. Buy it from any hardware store. I'm using a bimetal blade. It's a blade that'll cut metal and wood. It's useful for both. In this circumstance, it'll cut the whole neck without any trouble, without having to replace the blade. I like to use a screwdriver or a chisel to take it down. Make sure that it stays spread out. It doesn't close up on me, causing me to have my blade bind. I like to cut some on the left side, some on the right side, go back and forth. That way I can make sure that I'm following the line properly. And keeping the cut as straight as I can. That way it'll help a lot more when I'm doing the finish work at the end, having a nice straight line. As you can see now, it's getting really flexible. There's not very much material left holding it on. So it doesn't pinch down so much anymore. But you do have to be careful at the end so you don't drop your neck on the ground. There we go. Now that it's off, we need to take and clean up these surfaces, both here and here. Clean up this little bit on the bottom that I didn't cut. That's what I left there so it stayed on and didn't fall onto the ground. Okay. Our next step, what we're going to do is use grinder. We're going to clean off these surfaces, get rid of these burrs that are hanging off here. We don't want any of that stuff going on. I want it to be nice and clean. Then we're going to grind the neck and clean up this weld down here and clean up these edges on this one as well. Okay, our next step is going to be marking the block out so we know how deep it's supposed to go in the neck, and then we're going to template these and mark them out on here so we know where to drill the holes so that we can rosette weld these in, also known as plug welding. I'm going to start with just a little piece of tape and stick it on here. Stick this to the side so I can use that. Now on here, we don't want to bury this block completely in the neck. We want to move the neck forward a little bit to add extra clearance for your ignition switch to dash. So what I'm going to do is from this center line right here, right in the middle of this block, I'm going to go a ½ inch each direction to give me a 1 inch overall. that way I have a 1 inch forward movement of the neck to ensure everything clears properly once it's all assembled. Now, put this up here where I'm going to line up this mark that I just made with the edge of the neck that I just cut off. And I'm going to mark on the side of the neck the outside of the block. That way I can put the tape template where it belongs in relation to where the block's going to be once it's in the neck. So I'll just take this here, stick it on where it goes. You can see, just draw around it so I have a good idea where my hole needs to be. Normally just do 4. You don't really need much more than that. And you'll notice on the bottom one here that the second lump here doesn't really go into the neck so much, but that's okay. We're going to weld inside the neck anyway. I like to weld inside here when I'm doing it. So the next step we're going to do is we're going to drill these holes out. Then we're going to have to clean up inside here. If you look inside here, you can see this weld, and that's going to stop this block from fitting all the way in there. But we need to clean up in there after we drill our holes anyway. So we're going to go ahead and drill the holes first. I have the neck and the vise here now. I'm going to drill out these 4 holes that we just marked out and punched. I'm going to start with a pilot bit. We're going to end up doing the hole about a 400 thousandths hole when we're done. Normally you would use cutting fluid to drill holes so as not to damage your bit or burn it up, but in this particular instance I do not like to use cutting fluid because the oil gets inside of here and it can contaminate the weld when you go to weld it together. Now I prefer it to be cleaner. Now when you drill these holes out, you're welcome to use a regular drill bit. I prefer to use a step bit. It's easier to drill a hole that's large with a step bit 1 step at a time as opposed to going from this 1/4 inch hole that I have to a 7/16 hole in 1 drill bit. But you can do that. It'll work just fine. reason that we're drilling these holes so big is to make sure that they're actually strong enough to do what we want them to do. If it was a smaller size, it would hold the neck, but it wouldn't be very strong, and you would be relying on every other weld more than you are with the larger holes. So the next thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to sand the paint off of all this, or the powder coat. I'm going to go all the way around this edge here, and I'm going to go around each one of these holes. That one's cleaned up and ready now, and we're gonna go over to the frame. We're gonna do the same thing on the frame. Marking 2 spots on the top to drill 2 plug holes in the top of it also. We're going to go back to using the template that I already previously made, same way we did on the neck. Put our drill hole right in the center of them, just like we did on the neck. These two I marked out on the top. I put them about an inch apart, and I put them right dead down the center because that's where it's going to meet up with the center part of the block. Next step is going to be cleaning the inside of the neck and the inside of the backbone. I like to use this belt sander. Works out awesome for this. And what I'm going to do is clean up the burrs on the inside of the holes so the block will fit in there. Now cleaning up the end of the neck here is going to take a little bit more time because we have to clean up the welds that are in here. When I weld this on the outside, it burns through the inside here, and these little chunks of weld, they are going to stop the block from going in there, so I have to get rid of those also. you go. Weld's gone, burr's gone. Now we can get the block put in here. We're gonna put it in the neck first. That way I can weld all these plug welds and weld inside here while it's on the table. It's easier than trying to do it upside down on the frame over there. So now that we've gotten the welds and the burrs from the holes that we drilled sanded out of here, it's time for us to get this neck block put in here. And it's going to take a little bit of hammering. We made this fit really tight. We don't want it to be loose so it can be crooked. As it fits tight in here, it ensures that the angle of your neck and the straightness of your neck stay as they are supposed to. Makes it easier for the installation if it goes together squarely and straight. So I use a dead blow for this so I don't mangle up this block. I'm going to hammer it in until the line that I previously marked on here is lined up, and then as you can see it's not touching the top right now. I'm going to use a C-clamp to pull it together and pull it up against the top of the neck. That is what's going to ensure the angle being correct. Okay, so once you have it knocked into the block up to the line that you've drawn on there, what you need to do next is look down in the hole here. I use a flashlight and visually verify that the top of the block is pressed up against the inside of the tube. That's what's going to make the angle correct. And it looks just perfectly fine to me. So I'm going to tap it in just a little bit more. There we go. And then the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to take this block and we're going to weld it into this frame or into this neck here, so that it'll be one piece and we don't have to worry about doing both of them on the frame. We can do half of it here. Makes it easier. I'm going to start off by tacking it up on top up here, and then I'm going to use this same C-clamp here to make sure that these sides are pressed down up against the side of the block, because as long as this is pressed against the side of the block and the backbone is pressed against the side of the block, it makes the finish work come out much better when you're doing the final fitment of the fill piece that we have to add in there later. With that one tack on, we can take the clamp off. And this side's pretty flat with the block. And we give it a little bit of squeeze just to make sure it stays flush. And I'm going to tack it on the end, or on this edge right here anyway. Now that this block is tacked in here, then we got the sides pressed up against the edge. We're going to go ahead and do some plug welds. Now I like to do a sequence where I don't do all of one side. I like to do one on each side, crisscross top to bottom. So I'll do one on top front here, one on bottom rear here, and then bottom front here, and then I'll just go back and forth so I'm not doing all of the work on one side at one time. That'll help keep it straighter. there's our first one. Always remember when you're doing a rosette or a plug weld that you need to make sure that you melt into the block at the bottom of the hole and fill up the hole from there. Don't just start trying to fill the hole up, because if it doesn't attach to the bottom part, then it's no good. So that when I do this, I'm going to sit and I'm going to put the heat in to the bottom and start my puddle on the bottom in the center, and then wash it out to the outside edges. Now if you have an issue like this right here where your hole doesn't quite line up with the part that you need to weld on, that's fine. You just need to make sure you get over to that part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this one at an angle and I'm going to aim it towards that part of the block. Okay, we got all 8 of those rosette welds welded. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to weld inside here along this edge here and here. Now I'm going to go ahead and weld up all around the outside and get this finish welded up so we can grind it and get it prepared to put into the frame. Here's what we should have when we're done. 4 rosette welds welded up, top and bottom welded here, on the top here, same on this side, and then in the inside here, you should have these welds here, making sure that everything's stuck as good as it can be. So now that we have this all welded in, everywhere where we want to do, I'm going to do more prep work. I'm going to do to clean up on the welds here before I put it in, just once again to save me from having to do it when it's on frame. Now sometimes this weld here and these welds here, they stick out past this casting on the neck, and since you already have the neck here and they're going to be painted anyway, at this point in time I would normally take and clean up any of that stuff that needs to be cleaned up, but this one looks pretty good already. Maybe there's a little bit here, but this weld here and this weld here are already cleaned down, so there's not much to do. I'm gonna grind these welds down a little bit so that when we put it all together, it'll help with the piece that I'm gonna fit in between the backbone and the neck as a fill piece. That way I don't have to cut them to fit around those welds. So now this piece should now be ready to go into the backbone. What I'm going to do next is go over to the backbone, and I'm going to clean the powder coat off the backbone where we drilled the holes earlier. Looks like there's still a little bit of that weld left on the bottom here. So here on the other side of the bike you have the VIN stamped into the side of the frame. On the left side that's not there, so you don't have to worry about it, but on this side you got to be very careful not to hit that. So I'm going to be as precise as I can and only clear the powder coat off just this surface and not touch any of the number there. There we go. That's going to give us a clean surface to be able to weld on. And then after it's welded and we come back and grind, we're going to have to do the same thing and make sure we're careful not to hit that VIN.